Now, I've been lucky enough to be riding this beautiful beast for the last couple of weeks. It's the Triumph Speedmaster, and it's been an absolute hoot to ride, and I've really enjoyed it. But no bike is perfect, so if you're interested in the Triumph Speedmaster, stick around and stay tuned, and I'll tell you what I've learned. Hey kids, the Piston Flyer here, hope you're well. Now, for the past few weeks I've been lucky enough to be borrowing this beautiful bike from Triumph UK for long-term tests. So what I've done is ride it as much as possible to learn as much as I can about the machine. I've ridden it on all sorts of roads in all sorts of conditions, and I've tried to learn as many lessons as I can about the bike. Not just the good things, but the bad things too. Also in the video, what I'm going to do is go through the cost of ownership of the machine. I've got some insurance quotes. I've learned how much the thing costs to service and how much it's going to cost you if you buy one of these, and then I'll give you my overall summary at the end of what I think of the bike. So if you're interested in the Triumph Speedmaster, this is the video for you.
So how does the Speedmaster cope around town then? Well, crikey, very quiet down here today. It's actually a Saturday morning and I expect it to be busy, but there's very little going on. Anyway, around town in the urban environment, the Speedmaster is absolutely fine because it's very low down. It's a very unintimidating ride. So stopping and starting, you can get your feet down, you can move the bike around. She doesn't feel particularly wide, she's alright for filtering. I guess the only issue in town is the fact that you are sat so low down, you don't get a great view over traffic, so it's not as good as some bikes for sort of seeing over the traffic and working out your route through. She seems to have a pretty good turning circle, so if you do find yourself stuck between vehicles or whatever, if you want to get through a gap, you can do that. And the widest part on the bike is of course these big old handlebars, so they do the sort of whiskers trick really nicely. You're not going to get stuck trying to get through something that you're not going to make. So you can let me go. Yep, thank you. So yeah, other than the sort of visibility over traffic thing, not an issue through town. Love the way this thing sounds. So what about touring on the Speedmaster then? What would that be like? Well, of course you can tour on any motorcycle. So the Speedmaster is no different. You can absolutely go on tour on this. The comfortable riding position means that you could tour on it for a good few hours. I guess the downside with it on tour would be if you want to cover some big miles and you want to get some distance on motorways and so on, then if you go on the higher speed roads, you're going to be subject to that wind blast. And that could be a bit fatiguing after a while. Also, of course, you need some sort of solution for carrying your kit. Now, of course, you can wear a rucksack, which is perfectly comfortable in this upright riding position. And you can get bags for the Speedmaster that Triumph make, sort of leather arrangements that strap on the side. They're kind of in keeping with the look, I guess, but I personally don't like them. But you could get those if you wanted to, or of course you can strap a bag on the back of the bike, that's no issue. So yeah, touring on the bike, eminently possible, but maybe not my first choice as a touring machine. So what's the bike like moving it around on your driveway or in a car park? Well, let's just pop into this little car park here and have a look. Let's stick her in space just here amongst the litter. Nice. Alright, select neutral. There we go. Stand down. Okay, so I've mentioned before that it's got this really low seat height on the bike, so it's very unintimidating when you come to a halt. And if you want to move the thing around as well, the good thing about it is because it's so low down, the weight is so low down, you've also got plenty of grab handles and things to hold onto. So actually, have a little look around, very easy to shift around because of its, as I say, low centre of gravity. And I'm going uphill here, it's just not an issue. Turning circle on this is excellent as well. There's a car on the way there, look, but if it wasn't for that Maserati, I'd do a whole 180 within one parking space. So yeah, lugging around, moving about in your driveway in the car park, absolutely no issue at all on the Speedmaster. Okay, so night time on the Speedmaster then. How does the big old Triumph handle riding in the dark? Well, absolutely fine. It's got this really nice LED light on the front, chucks out loads of light. As ever, the old GoPro won't show you the full extent of it, but it's just as good as any car headlight I've ever used, so that's excellent. Unfortunately I've got a few cars behind me, so I've got to be a bit careful about what faffing about I do with the lights. But let's go down here, I'll show you what she's like on full beam. Nothing coming. Okay, full beam on this, there's a little button on the front of the left handlebar that you sort of pull, and there you go, she's on full. I've just pressed it once, it goes on to full, lights up, everything as you'd expect. And then I'll press the same button again and it goes down. So that's the button on the left handlebar. There would often be a flasher that you just sort of touch and it would flash the headlights, but in this case if you touch it, it doesn't flash the headlights, it puts it on full beam, and you touch it again to turn it off. Bit of a pain, that is. I've been on other Triumphs that do that. It's not, I don't think that's the best implementation of lights. The switch that you would expect to put the headlights on, the sort of thumb switch on the left grip, actually switches between the daylight running light and the dipped light. So I'm not going to use that now because I'm on dip beam at the moment, and it is of course very dark now I'm riding. So but the dip light does work fine. And then I guess the only other thing to note is that the switch gear on the Triumph isn't lit up at night. It's you know, it's all dark there. Luckily it's quite a simple motorbike, so you don't really need it lit because there aren't that many switches to navigate. That said, some of the Triumphs these days do have lit switch gear, which I like, and certainly all the KTMs do, something that KTM seem to always do, and have absolutely got that right. I don't know why other manufacturers don't do that, but they're not lit on the Speedmaster. But the main thing is the actual dip beam works really nicely, so yeah, no problems riding the Speedmaster at night.
Okay, at the start of the video, I said I would give you a list of the things that I'd found out about the bike, not just the good things, but the negatives too. So let me run through some of the things that I found out that you maybe wouldn't pick up if you're just on a 1 hour test ride of this bike. So the negatives then. First thing, and these are in no particular order, one thing I don't like, just a small point, but just something I noticed, these rubber bands on the handlebars here. They're there to tidy up the cables, of course, and so I understand why they're there, but I just think they look a bit cheap and nasty. It would be so much better, wouldn't it, if Triumph could find a better way of tidying those up. When people make custom bikes and stuff, they take the time to actually hide cabling within the handlebars. Now I know that takes time and effort and would no doubt put the cost up, but wouldn't it look better if that was the case? I think so. Yeah, number one, just think those with such a lovely fit and finish on the bike, those sort of rubber band things there, or basically glorified cable ties, just don't look very good. So black mark there, small point, but just something I thought worth pointing out if you hadn't spotted it. Next thing, when you're riding it, there are some vibes on this bike. Not horrendously so. Generally speaking, they're quite low frequency, and you know, you call them character, and that's a good thing. But there are some annoying vibes in second gear at higher revs. Now, you're unlikely to be riding it in second gear at higher revs for very long, but if you do, that's when you get a bit of vibes through the peg. So just something to be aware of. Not a massive deal, but they are there. Next thing, foot pegs. While we're talking about riding along, foot peg scraping. I'm not a big cruiser guy. I haven't ridden many cruisers before, so that was a bit of a shock when I jumped on this bike and went round a roundabout for the first time. In fact, the first 3 corners I took on this bike, I scraped the foot pegs. A little bit alarming when you're not used to it. They are designed for it. They do have hero blobs on the bottom to wear on the ground, but the way I had my feet at the time, my heels were hanging down a bit low actually, and my feet touched the ground as well. So a little bit alarming. Didn't know what was going on. Had to adapt the way that I ride a bit on this bike. So something else to be aware of if you're not normally a cruiser rider. And the foot pegs can scrape if you start, you know, pushing on, and that can be a bit alarming until you're used to it. They are designed to do it. Again, may not be a big deal for you, but for me, found that a little bit of a shocker to start with because I wasn't expecting it. Next thing, brakes. The brakes on here, we've got twin discs now, and we've obviously got 2 sets of calipers, which is an improvement on the original bobber. I was critical on the original bobber because it just had the single disc, and I found the brakes not very good on that. Well, the brakes on here are better, but they're still not fantastic, so a little bit disappointed on that. They're not quite as good as I'd hoped. It may be that this is a fairly new bike and they're not fully bedded in, but you know, I would have thought Brembo's on 310mm discs would feel a little bit sharper than these do. Maybe it's this particular bike and it needs sorting out. They are better than on the bobber, but or on the standard bobber. These are the same now as the ones on the bobber black, but they're still not as good as I'd hoped. Next, fuel tank. Again, better than on the original bobber, but it's still quite small at 12 litres. It's good for about 130 miles, which I suppose is good, you know, is about normal. If you're used to riding sports bikes, then 130 miles is about what you get out of a tank. So no big deal. It's definitely an improvement on the original bobber, but still a little bit lower than I'd have liked. This is the sort of bike that I'd like to ride, do a bit of touring on, and you're going to have to stop quite a bit at the fuel station for that. So that's another thing that I picked up. Another small point that you may or may not be aware of, looking at it, you'd think maybe they're bases on the bobber, which I'm sure Triumph have. But one thing they haven't carried over from the bobber is the adjustable seat. On the bobber, you can slide that forward and back. On this one, it's absolutely fixed. Now, for me, it works fine. I'm just 5'8", and it feels comfy, and I can get my feet on the deck, no problem at all. But if you're a larger person, there is no adjustment, so that may be an issue for you. And similarly, when I'm talking about things they haven't carried over from the bobber, the instrument binnacle here. On the bobber, this moves up and down. On this one, it appears to be completely fixed. It doesn't adjust. Again, no big deal. The reason why it adjusted was because on the bobber, the seat moved forward and back, and you might want to change the angle of tilt. Well, that's not an issue here because the seat doesn't adjust, as I just said. But that's another thing that doesn't happen on here that you might expect would have done. Okay, next thing I picked up, no centre stand. I'm not sure that there's one available as an option, but again, if you want to oil the chain, things like that, do general maintenance, then a centre stand is very handy. So yeah, a little bit of a shame that there's no centre stand. Why aren't all bikes of this type fitted with centre stands as standard? I mean, I can't think of any bike that has a chain that wouldn't need a centre stand, other than maybe sports bikes. So yeah, let's start a campaign for getting centre stands as standard. Next, pillion perch. Now, I couldn't actually convince anybody to ride pillion with me on this bike because they didn't like the look of that pillion perch, and I have to say, when you sit on it, it is quite hard. So it's quite small. Depends on how brave your pillion is, but these my girls that sometimes ride on the back with me, I want to say my girls, my daughters and my wife, they don't like the fact that it's quite small and you can only hold on to that grab bar at the back. So pillion may or may not work for you. Didn't work for me. I couldn't convince anyone to get on the back with me. Next, headlight switch. I call it the Triumph funny headlight switch. Some other Triumphs have the same thing with this. Now, this runs in a weird way in that it's got this fancy LED daylight running light, and the switch on the handlebars controls that. So when you get a green indication in the instrument binnacle, which I would normally associate with the main beam, not the main beam, the just dipped headlights being on, that means the DRL is on. When you switch the switch on the handlebars and that green light goes out, then you're on dipped beam. To me, that seems counterintuitive that the green light goes out when you're on dipped beam, but that's the way it works on here. So that's a little odd, just something to get used to. And therefore, switching on the main beam on the headlights is on the trigger on the right-hand side, as I mentioned in the little night bit. Again, just a little different to the usual configuration. I'm sure you get used to it, but just something I thought worth pointing out. While I'm talking about the instrument cluster generally, I just don't like this single instrument cluster on here. It's a real shame because Triumph have done a lovely job on the fit and finish on this bike, but this single dial just doesn't do it for me. It just looks a bit cheap and plasticky. Whereas on bikes like the T120 and I think on the T100, if I remember rightly, you've got the dual chrome dials that look absolutely fantastic and in keeping with the bike. I think on a bike that's at the premium end of the range, which this is, I think it definitely needs those twin dials. So maybe in the next incarnation Triumph, I can put a little request in to stick those twin dials on, then maybe I'll buy one of these. So yeah, twin dials please. No heated grips as standard, just a personal bugbear. This one doesn't have heated grips. When I picked it up from Triumph, it was a cold day. My hands were freezing by the time I got home. So yeah, let's at least have an option for them. They may be an option, to be fair. I need to double check that, but they're not on here fitted as standard. And then last but not least, well actually one main thing, one minor thing. First thing, at motorway speeds, it is quite hard to ride for sustained periods of time. At 70 miles an hour, as you can imagine, you're sat bolt upright, you're like a sail in the wind, you are having to hold onto the machine. It'll go a lot faster than 70 apparently, and if you do go faster than 70, I've been told that you really have to hang on. So if you're going to be doing big motorway miles, you possibly don't want to go down the cruiser route, but that's the case for all cruisers, I'd say. And then last but not least, talking of cruisers, what about the cruiser image? A bit like, you know, Harleys and BMW GSs that I know all about. Sometimes cruiser riders are looked down on. I don't know why. I've absolutely fallen in love with the whole cruiser thing, and I'd like to get one in the garage. I don't have one, but I completely get why they're popular. But there is an image thing with cruisers. It's sort of an old man's bike. It's sort of the place you go when you can't ride sports bikes anymore. Why is that? And you've got to be prepared to kind of live with that. Again, small point. Who cares what other people think? Go for what you want. But there we go. There is the cruiser image thing to contend with as well. So that's it. I'm nitpicking a lot, but I wanted to tell you the things I'd found that I didn't quite like about the bike. So, having said that, there's plenty to love about the machine as well. So let's get on to the positive points. Okay, so to the positive points that I found on the bobber then, and there are absolutely loads of these. So first thing, the engine. What an amazing bit of kit. It's got amazing shove this. Cruisers are all about torque, aren't they? And this one is no exception. Puts out 78 pounds-feet of torque, or 106 newton meters at 4,000 RPM. Exactly where you need it. nice and slow, lazy, you roll on and the thing absolutely flies and sounds magnificent too. So that engine, I really love it. It's a great lump in here. Absolutely gives you loads of shove at real world speeds. That's one of the things that I do love about cruisers. And similarly, lazy riding characteristics I've written here. It's just a bike that encourages you to not ride like a lunatic. You're unlikely to kill yourself. Well, who knows? But I mean, you can ride it like a lunatic if you want to. But it's just the sort of bike that you jump on, you putt along the back lanes. It's absolutely a joy to ride. It's got an amazingly long first and second gear on this. So it means that, you know, you can just ride it really, really lazily. I love the lazy riding characteristics of this bike. Again, probably something that all cruisers have, but I think it's fantastic. Another thing, talk about the engine. This bike, Triumph, have rather wisely fitted with a 270-degree crank firing order, something that they've done on all the new Bonnevilles, and that means that this one absolutely sounds amazing. Hopefully you will have heard it on the video good enough. It just makes that lovely sound. Even with these standard cans, I think if you decatted them, put some aftermarket exhausts on, it would sound even better. But yeah, it sounds great as it comes from the factory. The next thing that I really love about this, again, I mentioned it earlier, is the fit and finish on it. It's just Triumph do a really good job on this these days. I mean, the fuel tank on this particular colour is particularly nice. It's got these incredible coach lines painted on here, all done by hand, and it just looks beautiful. So it's a thing of beauty to ride. Little attentions to detail, the Triumph logos marked around, just the right amount of chrome. I just think the thing looks right. Okay, next, comfort. Actually, this riding position, even though, as I mentioned before, at motorway speeds, it wants to blow you off the back. Generally speaking, at normal speeds, really, really comfortable. Nice padded seat, great riding position. I found it great. I've heard some people say that on cruisers they get a little uncomfortable after a few hours because of all the weight being on your coccyx, but I've not found that. I can ride this thing all day long and I find it really, really comfortable. So comfort is something that this bike is all about. The way these handlebars are tilted back just makes the whole thing just a really comfortable riding experience. I'm not sure I've come across a more comfortable bike to ride, to be honest. So comfort, great thing on the Speedmaster. The other thing is really easy to manoeuvre around. It's got a tight turning circle on here, big old bars so you can lever it around. Because it's so low, it's easy to move around in your garage or on the driveway. So no troubles there. Manoeuvring around, either riding it in a car park or moving it in and out of your garage. Piece of cake on this, which is nice. Another couple of things, very cheap to insure, as I mentioned before. Surprised me that. I guess it's because the sort of people that ride these don't tend to have accidents. I don't know, but don't want to talk anything up. But yeah, really cheap to insure, which is a great thing. It's a Triumph. Again, I just love Triumphs, and I could never imagine not having one in the garage. So for me, that's a plus point. I mentioned the turning circles are very good, and then last but not least, it just makes you feel good to ride it. This thing just puts a grin on your face, and for me, that's the most important thing about a bike. When I've opened the garage with this in here, this has been the bike that I wanted to take out. It's just a real feel-good bike, and I love that about it.
So what about fuel then, and fueling up on the Speedmaster? Well, I need to go and get some Go Juice now, as you can see I've got the petrol light on. Came on when it said I had 30 miles to run. This is the little range indicator here, so it says I've got 24 to go still. So that came on when I had 30 to go, so you've got plenty to go when that comes on. Hopefully enough to find some fuel. Since I've had the bike for the last week or so, I've been averaging, according to the bike's computer, about 58 miles per gallon, which seems pretty good to me. Unfortunately, I haven't had enough fill up sort of cycles to work out what it's actually doing, but 58 is what the bike is telling me. What I'm going to do now is pop over and get some of Morrison's finest hopper juice and fill her up, see if there's any surprises actually at the pump. I'm not expecting any, but you never know. Oh man, look at the queues. It's always so busy getting petrol around here. There's just so few fuel stations these days, it seems, and therefore you always have to queue up. What a pain. Right, my turn has come. What I would say is a good thing about the Speedmaster is it has got a proper fuel gauge on here. If you look here, it's tiny, but just there, look, there is a proper fuel gauge, so you have got that, which is excellent. Okay, so I'm not anticipating any issues filling up, of course. It's got one of these retro looking fuel caps on here, so key comes out the side here, and then you slide that round, and then off she pops. Fairly straightforward, he says. Come on. Oh, okay. It screws off. There you go. That was good. So it screws off. Once you know that, no problem. Glug in some of Morrison's finest. Right, that'll do me. Managed to squeeze in 9 litres there, which doesn't sound like a lot, does it? £11.76 for the fill. Right, reverse procedure. Spin it on. Key. I made that look a lot harder than it really is. Right, there we go. Right, so as I say, keys down the side here. Stand up. Right, let's see how quickly she registers. There's the fuel gauge. Doesn't know that she's full yet. Let's see how long that takes. I've always got a bit of a thing about that, particularly with Triumphs. I don't know why it takes a while for them to register. Still not registered. Well, I'll definitely filled her up, but she says I've still got a range of 22 miles. I'm sure she'll notice she's got fuel in a minute. Okay, she has now registered that I've got fuel on board. Look, full tank showing, and it's saying I've got a range now of 114 miles. So on that particular bit of unscientific testing, that's 114 miles for about a tenner. That'll do. I was going to say no drama at the fuel station, but I made that look very very difficult with the fuel cap there. In fact, it's not difficult at all. You just have to spin it off, rotate it off, and then you're good. It's not just a, you know, with the key job. Anyway, there we go. That's it for faffing about at the fuel station. So in the wet then on the Speedmaster, what's that all about? Well, you don't get much wetter than today. It's been raining all night. It's absolutely horrible, and it's your classic November day. There's wet leaves on the deck, slippery everywhere. It's just horrible. But I have to say, no real problem on the Speedmaster. The tyres seem to be nice and grippy. I haven't had any moments, and she seems all right. Of course, you've got the added benefit of ABS, as you have on all modern bikes, of course, which is a real nice to have in conditions like this. And of course, you've got two riding modes on the bike. You've got a rain mode, so you can just dumb down that torque a little bit. Makes it a bit more sensible on these slippery conditions. What you don't have on the Speedmaster, or as far as I can find, is any traction control. Haven't found that to be an issue thus far, but interesting on a on a premium bike that has ABS, so presumably it uses the same sensors normally, but it doesn't have traction control. But there we go. It's one of those bikes that you're not going to be going super mad on. All that said, of course, the torque on this bike is all about the torque on this bike, so yeah, I wouldn't give it a massive handful in these slippery conditions, but yeah, I haven't found it too bad. Of course, you're in the full wind blast, so you need decent waterproofs. But as far as riding the bike, it's no worse or better than any other. In fact, you could argue it's better because you've got ABS and you've got a rain mode, so gives you a degree of safety net, although as ever, physics would eventually take over. How about on faster roads then, dual carriageways? Here I am on a road that's seldom described as a faster road. This is the A404, often choked up, but actually today quite free running. But it's a dual carriageway, so you can do 70. And here I am cruising along at just a tickle over 70 miles an hour, indicated, so probably actually 70. And the Bonneville, of course, with its big old powerful 1200cc engine, has got loads and loads more to give. If you want to go faster, you can. But the limiting factor, of course, on this sort of bike is wind blast. You do, of course, have no protection whatsoever, so the airflow is straight into your chest, which means it has a tendency to want to rip you off the bike. So much faster than this, and you know, you're just hanging on for dear life. So I think if you're going to do lots of fast motorway miles, you'd probably struggle on the Speedmaster. No surprise there, I guess. Just because you have to hang on so much. But if you're going to cruise along at 70, that's completely doable. Let's pull in, as I've got a car behind me. But again, whether I want to do it for long periods of time, I don't know. But then again, this isn't really the sort of bike that you're going to want to be doing big motorway miles on. It's more of a back lane cruiser, I would say. But yeah, if you've got a commute, or you're going to do some occasional riding on faster roads, then it's completely possible to do. Just don't expect to be nipping down the autobahn at 100 miles an hour and be able to hold on. The good news is the airflow is completely clean that gets you, so it's not all that dirty turbulent air, you're not being buffeted around. So I've certainly ridden worse bikes on faster roads.
So at the start of the video I said that I'd give you what I found out about the cost of ownership of this machine. How much would one of these things cost you if you just kept it in your garage? So I've done a bit of research, made some notes as usual, as you'd expect, and found out the following costs. So listen up. So cost of ownership, road tax, or what I should call it, vehicle excise duty in this country, because it's over 600cc, that's going to cost you £80 a year. It costs you £4 a month extra if you pay by direct debit, curiously, but £80 a year if you're paying one lump. That's the road tax. Insurance, spoke to my friends at Principal Insurance and got myself a quote for this, and this is remarkably good value to insure if you're me. So this is just an indicative quote. It obviously only applies to me, living where I do with my no claims bonus, etc. But Principal Insurance said that fully comp, this bike would cost me £98.12. Absolutely incredible, with a £550 excess. But nonetheless, that's one of the cheaper bikes that I've come across since I've been doing these reviews to insure, so that's absolutely fantastic. Servicing wise, went to my friends down at Hart's Triumph in Hemel Hempstead and asked them how much they would charge me to get one of these serviced. So they told me the following, and again this is indicative because this is what the dealer in Hemel Hempstead would charge you. There's a 600 mile run-in check as usual. That would cost you £50 at Hart's Triumph. That's because they only charge you for the parts, not the labour. So £50 for the run-in check, so that's fine. Then the servicing on this bike is every 10,000 miles or annually, so it's quite a nice long service interval, but it's whichever comes sooner. So you know, not many people I would suggest are going to do 10,000 miles on it, but the annual service on this, if you don't get to the 10,000 miles, is £195. But then on every sort of 10,000 mile increment, there's an additional charge. So at 10,000 miles, it'll be £240 the service. At 20,000, it'll be £590. That's the one where you have the valve clearances, so quite expensive. At 30,000, back to £240. At 40,000, £650, so that's the big one, and then 50,000 back to £240 again. So if you do 10,000 miles every year, you're looking at those bigger costs, but most people won't do, and that'll just be the annual service then at £195. So hope you followed that. So just to summarise then, so tax £80 per annum, insurance £98 per annum, and servicing based on if you just do 5,000 miles a year, that's the £50 running in service plus the £195 annual service, £245. Add that together, gives you an annual cost £423, or divide it by 12 to give you a monthly cost, £35.25 to have this bike in your garage ready to ride. And that is one of the cheapest bikes that I've ever done this calculation for. Remarkable for such a beautiful looking 1200cc machine. So yeah, £35.25. That does of course ignore consumables like tyres, batteries, brakes. You'll need to factor in that sort of stuff, and of course petrol and depreciation. But that's just the sort of upfront cost, just to give you an idea. So in summary then, what do I think of the Triumph Speedmaster? Well, as you guessed, I really like this bike. I really do. I love retro bikes and I love Triumph, so I'm a bit of a fanboy, I admit. But out of all the Bonneville-derived bikes that I've ridden, this is in my top two at the moment. This and the Scrambler are the bikes that I like the most out of the range. Absolutely fantastic bit of kit. They've improved this no end over the bobber. I called this a bobber earlier, apologies, Speedmaster of course, in that they've made the braking is better, it's a bit more comfortable, it's a bit more practical in terms of the range out of the fuel tank. In every way I think it's better than the bobber. This is the one to have if you're in the cruiser market and you're a Triumph fanboy, a bit like myself. So there we have it. So that's the Speedmaster. I hope you've found that of some interest. If this is the first time you've seen one of my videos, then thanks very much indeed for watching until the end. It'd be great to have you along. Do hit that subscribe button if you've not already done so. I don't just do bike reviews, but I do trips and tours, I do kit reviews, I do bike news, I do the odd live stream, basically anything and everything to do with bikes. I do that here on the Mist and Fly. It'd be great to have you along. And also don't forget, I'm on social media. I'm trying to build up my social media presence a bit. I've just joined Instagram. It's still a bit of a mystery to me, but it'll be really good to have you join me on Instagram. Look me up there on at Mist and Fly. Okay, that's it for this time. Hope you've enjoyed that. Look forward to speaking to you again soon. Till then, this has been the Mist and Fly. Cheerio.